Usually when we talk about engineering, whether we're talking about building a suspension bridge or, I don't know, mapping a rail line.
Or even just assembling a clockwork mechanism.
Right. We expect this absolute predictable control.
Sure, it's just cause and effect.
Exactly. The underlying assumption is that if you understand the physics, if you put the pieces together in the correct sequence.
And you tighten the gears properly.
Yeah, then the machine has no choice. It just has to do exactly what it was designed to do. We find immense comfort in that kind of predictability.
We really do.
But the moment you attempt to take that blueprint, that rigid demand for cause and effect, and you try to apply it to the human soul.
Oh, the gears immediately jam.
They completely seize up. And that is exactly what we are getting into today. Welcome to our deep dive, broadcasting to you straight from the common room on a little station on Commercial Street in Atchison, Kansas, Chesterton Radio.
It is great to be here.
It's great to have you. Today, we're looking at a historical moment where people actually believed they could engineer human affection.
Yeah, they genuinely believed you could manufacture loyalty and virtue just by building a strong enough cage.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is a profound and honestly a dangerous arrogance. This idea that the human will can be treated like a mathematical equation.
Like if you apply enough pressure, you automatically receive obedience.
Exactly. So today we are immersing ourselves in the 17th century, specifically the theatrical laboratory of the French playwright Molière.
Right, we've got some amazing sources to go through.
We do. We are digging into the text, the historical context, and the immense cultural fallout of two specific comedies. First, there's The School for Husbands from 1661.
Okay.
And then its immediate, far more radical successor, The School for Wives from 1662.
And we should clarify right at the outset for you listening at home, we aren't here to just read you two plot summaries.
No, not at all.
What we're doing with these sources is tracking a single, continuous, and just brilliantly developing argument. Molière is asking these profound questions about marriage, about freedom, the nature of education.
And the terrifying fragility of male authority, frankly.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
He's asking what innocence actually is and whether it can even exist without freedom.
Yeah, Molière really treats the stage as a testing ground for a hypothesis about human nature. He runs the experiment in the first play. He observes the mechanics of where it succeeds and fails.
And then he evidently gets dissatisfied with how easily his villains were defeated.
Right. So he pushes the experiment to its absolute terrifying extreme in the second play. He alters the variables.
He makes the cage tighter.
He really does.
And the comic machinery he uses to dismantle these cages is nothing short of brilliant. We're going to see supposedly clever, controlling men working tirelessly, sweating over their blueprints.
Only to realize they've engineered their own spectacular downfalls.
Exactly. They build the traps, they set the bait, and they're the ones who end up dangling upside down from the tree.
It's just perfectly executed comedy.
So here's the core question we have to unpack today. Okay, let's unpack this. How do you build a school of love? And what happens when the students realize the teachers have no idea what they're doing?
That is the big question. And to understand the explosive nature of what Molière was doing on stage, we first have to understand the physical and cultural space he was operating in.
Right. Set the scene for us.
Okay, so imagine the Palais Royal Theater in Paris in 1661.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Now, this is not the quiet, reverent, dark auditorium we're used to today.
Not people sitting politely in rows.
Not at all. A theatrical performance was a loud, chaotic, deeply social event. The afternoon performances rarely started at the appointed hour of 2 o'clock because the audience was entirely preoccupied with itself.
Yeah, the sources paint a picture of a space that was almost aggressively alive. Like the pit, the standing room area, it's just packed with activity.
Oh, it was a circus. You had young gallants, the minor nobility, literally fencing.
Fencing, with swords in the theater.
Yes. Fencing, playing cards, throwing dice while they wait for the show to start.
Wow.
And you have vendors pushing through the dense crowd. It was a thriving, noisy business of selling oranges, nuts, and wine right in the middle of the audience.
The noise level would have been just staggering.
Deafening, really. And then the atmosphere would shift as the fashionable people from the court, the high nobility and the diplomatic circles began to arrive.
Right, the VIPs.
Exactly. And prominent men paid exorbitant fees, not just to sit near the stage, but to have their chairs placed upon the stage itself.
Wait, on the stage?
Oh,
with the actors.
right on the stage, because they wanted to be seen just as much as they wanted to see the play.
That is amazing.
And frequently, King Louis XIV himself was in attendance, openly showing his favor for Molière. I mean, he practically gifted him this theatrical space.
So it's a space built completely on spectacle and, looking at one another.
Precisely. And one of the high points of the pre-show excitement, this moment of almost magical anticipation, was the lowering of the great chandeliers.
Oh, I read about this in the sources.
Yeah, the stagehands would lower these massive ornate structures, light the dozens of candles, and as the chandeliers were hoisted back up into place, illuminating the wealthy, the powerful, and the royal.
The audience would erupt into applause, just for the lights.
Exactly. And under that warm, flickering candlelight, Molière would walk out.
Because he almost always played the lead comic roles in his own plays, right?
He did. He would step out in the conventional costume of the time, the knee breeches, a tight-fitting coat, a short cape.
And contemporary accounts describe him as having a naturally sad face, almost like a melancholy mask.
Yes, but the moment he began to perform, that mask would just shatter. His face became this fascinating, elastic study of human expressions.
He would bow to his admirers, to the king.
And then he would proceed to absolutely roast the societal absurdities of the very people who had just paid to watch him.
Which takes incredible nerve. He was a master of holding a mirror up to his audience, but it was a mirror that highlighted their most grotesque deformities.
It really was. And the most profound absurdity, the specific societal sickness he attacks in these two plays, was the grim, inescapable reality for women in 17th century France.
Right. This is where it gets pretty dark.
Very. If you examine the legal and cultural structures documented in the historical sources, the situation is incredibly bleak. Historians characterize this era as the consolidation of the family-state compact.
Now, I know that sounds incredibly bureaucratic to our listener, but we have to stress that this wasn't just like a cultural norm or an unwritten expectation. This was hard, punitive law.
Oh, absolutely. The French legists, working in tandem with the monarchy, were actively remolding the social body.
Because they had just come out of all that turmoil.
Right. They were attempting to stabilize the state after decades of religious and civil wars by consolidating family networks.
Okay, that makes sense on a macro level.
But the most effective way to consolidate a family network is to take absolute unyielding control over family formation. So they passed the Edict of 1556, which was a massive structural blow to personal liberty.
Because it lengthened the age of minority, right?
Exactly. It lengthened the age before you were considered a legal adult capable of making your own choices. They pushed it to 30 years for men and 25 years for women.
30 years old. I mean, imagine being 29 years old today. You could have fought in wars, managed estates, built a career, and you're still legally classified as a child who cannot choose a spouse without your father's signature.
That was the reality.
And for women, 24 years old, completely under the absolute authority of a patriarch. It's like a societal straitjacket.
It was a straitjacket driven by panic. The monarchy and the nobility were terrified of clandestine marriages. They were terrified that a young heir might squander the family bloodline and the family estate on a romantic whim with someone of a lower class.
So they just locked it all down.
They did. The penalties for defying this edict were absolute ruin. Children who married without parental consent could be completely disinherited, stripped of all property and titles.
It went even further a few decades later with the Ordinance of 1579, which, honestly, is a detail in the sources that genuinely shocked me.
The widow law.
Yes. It forced young widows, women who had already been married, who had lost their husbands, and who you would naturally assume had finally achieved some measure of independence. It forced them back under parental control if they were under 25.
The state literally refused to allow them to exist outside the authority of a man.
It's horrifying. Marriages were reduced to high-stakes economic treaties.
Entirely. They were about consolidating property, building political alliances, securing bloodlines. Mutual consent, affection, and certainly love were considered not just irrelevant, but potentially dangerous to the stability of the state.
So I want you listening to just imagine this for a second. Imagine walking down to the courthouse today and signing a legally binding contract that gives a stranger, someone you have perhaps met twice, total legal dominion over your bank account, your home, your physical movements, and your body for the rest of your life.
It's a terrifying thought.
Right. But in 1661, you didn't have to imagine it. For a woman, that was just the expected trajectory of your life.
It was a suffocating reality. And that profound lack of agency sets the incredibly high stakes for the dramatic rebellion Molière puts on stage. But we also must recognize that the women of the 17th century did not just accept this silently.
No, they didn't. They fought back, and they fought back using the only tools available to them.
Right. If society has locked every door, isn't it inevitable that these characters will have to pick the locks?
That's a great way to put it. They couldn't change the laws, so they changed the culture.
Exactly. The primary avenue of resistance was the formation of the salons and the culture of the précieuses.
Okay, explain who the précieuses were for us.
So because women were legally barred from formal secondary schools, colleges, and universities, they had no access to classical languages like Latin or Greek.
And those were the gatekeepers to higher learning, theology, and the sciences back then.
Right. So they created their own parallel educational spaces. The salons were intellectual gatherings hosted in the drawing rooms of prominent women, entirely outside the strictures of the male-dominated universities and households.
And what they were doing in these salons was essentially hacking the French language.
They were refining it, elevating it. The précieuses discussed literature, philosophy, and the mechanics of human emotion. They demanded that courtship be a refined art, not a crude economic transaction.
Right, they created those complex maps of love, like the famous carte de tendre.
Exactly, mapping out the nuanced stages of affection. They were exercising a degree of intellectual and cultural influence that deeply threatened the traditional patriarchal order.
I have to wonder, though, was Molière actually a feminist championing these women, or was he just a brilliant theatrical opportunist mining the anxieties of the men in the audience?
Well, that's a very fair question.
Because the men in power, the traditionalists, they absolutely loathed the précieuses. They viewed educated women as an existential threat.
It's a complex debate among historians. Molière often satirized the précieuses in his other plays, mocking their sometimes excessive linguistic affectations.
Right. He made fun of everybody.
He did. But in the plays we are looking at today, the intellectual awakening of the female characters is presented as an undeniable positive force. He may have been an opportunist, but he was an opportunist who recognized that the patriarchal demand for total, ignorant submission was not just cruel, it was fundamentally absurd and doomed to fail.
Which sets the stage perfectly for the first phase of his grand experiment, the School for Husbands, which premiered in 1661.
The first cage.
Exactly. Molière sets up a classic, controlled psychological test. We have two older brothers, Sganarelle, who was played by Molière himself, and Ariste.
And a dying friend has entrusted his two daughters, Isabelle and Leonore, to these brothers.
Right. The legal stipulation is absolute. The brothers must either marry the girls themselves or dispose of their hands in marriage to someone else when the time comes.
The control of the experiment is divided really cleanly here. The older brother, Ariste, who is nearly 60, takes charge of the younger sister, Leonore. And the younger brother, Sganarelle, who is around 40, takes charge of the older sister, Isabelle.
And these two men adopt diametrically opposed educational philosophies.
Complete opposites.
Sganarelle is the architect of the physical cage. His method with Isabelle is rooted in relentless, suffocating restriction. He relies on bolts, bars, and just keeping her physically locked inside the house.
He strips away any sense of aesthetic pleasure, too.
Oh, yeah. He dresses her in dull, heavy serge cloth while everyone else is wearing silk. He demands she spend all her waking hours mending linen or knitting stockings. He completely isolates her from all social contact, all balls, all plays.
The psychology of Sganarelle is driven by a deep-seated terror of humiliation. He genuinely operates on the mechanical belief that virtue can be manufactured simply by eliminating the opportunity for vice.
Right, like if Isabelle cannot physically reach another man, she cannot be unfaithful.
Exactly, and he boasts about this methodology. He publicly declares that he has no intention of wearing horns, which was the traditional symbol of the cuckold, and that the only way to be certain of a woman's fidelity is to control her every physical movement.
But then we look at the older brother, Ariste, and Ariste adopts a completely contrasting method with Leonore.
A radical method for the time.
He allows her immense freedom. He encourages her to attend social gatherings, to wear fine clothes, to participate in the culture of the city. He basically trusts her.
The historical texts show Ariste making what was, for a 17th century patriarch, a wildly radical assertion. He tells his brother, "A woman who is discreet by compulsion only is not often to be met with."
That's a great quote.
It is. He's stating a profound psychological truth. Suspicious precautions, bolts, and bars make neither wives nor maids virtuous. He argues that he prefers to win her heart through affection and mutual respect rather than imprison her body.
He realizes that if you try to govern every action, you don't create loyalty.
No, you only create resentment and a desire for rebellion.
Now, hold on. I do have to challenge Ariste's glowing reputation here for a second.
Probably, yeah.
Let's not pretend he is some 21st century egalitarian who has magically transcended his era. I mean, he is still a 60-year-old man who is raising a young girl with the explicit, predetermined intent to marry her.
True.
He controls her finances. He controls her legal status. So isn't his version of freedom just a much more sophisticated, perhaps more manipulative form of grooming?
That's a very sharp critique.
Like he's making a calculated bet that if he gives her a long enough leash, she will eventually wander back to him out of a sense of gratitude or obligation.
And that is a necessary point to make. Ariste is absolutely a product of his time, and the power dynamic is inherently unequal by modern standards. He is the guardian, she is the ward.
Right.
However, within the context of the 1661 legal framework we just discussed, his calculated bet represents a monumental shift in philosophy.
How's that?
Because what separates him from Sganarelle is his recognition of her internal life. He leaves Leonore complete liberty of choice regarding whether she actually wants to marry him.
Oh, I see. He is willing to risk rejection.
Exactly. He acknowledges that she possesses free will, even if the societal structure around them is fundamentally coercive. Sganarelle denies the existence of that free will entirely.
Okay, that's a brilliant distinction. And the comic machinery of the play hinges on the inevitable failure of Sganarelle's denial.
It really does. Molière turns the crank, and we see the results of the experiment.
Right. The woman given a degree of freedom, Leonore, freely chooses to stay with Ariste. But Isabelle, the woman placed in the physical cage, becomes an absolute master of escape.
Isabelle's sabotage of Sganarelle is just a masterclass in using the oppressor's tools against him. Starved of freedom, completely isolated, and desperate to connect with this young suitor named Valère, she realizes she has no conventional means of communication.
She can't just write a letter and hand it to a servant because she has no servants she can trust.
So she realizes her only available tool is Sganarelle's own paranoia.
This part is so funny. Because he has made himself her only point of contact with the outside world, she literally forces him to become her postman.
It is brilliantly funny. She tells Sganarelle that this young man, Valère, is harassing her.
Right. She claims he is stalking the house and planning to abduct her. She performs utter disgust at the very idea of this young gallant, which absolutely thrills Sganarelle.
Because Sganarelle's vanity is his blind spot. He thinks his strict, suffocating education is working perfectly.
He's like, yes, my system works.
Right. He believes he has successfully programmed her to hate the world as much as he does.
Exactly. So Isabelle sends Sganarelle over to Valère's house to yell at him, to deliver this scathing message telling him to back off.
But of course, Isabelle has carefully phrased the message so that Valère, who is tuned into the language of courtly love, easily deciphers the secret meaning.
She is secretly telling Valère that she loves him and needs him to act. And Sganarelle is just blindly passing it along.
And she escalates the deception remarkably. She tricks Sganarelle into delivering a physical letter next.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
She tells her guardian that Valère's servant boldly threw a letter through her window, and she begs Sganarelle to take it back to Valère unopened to demonstrate her absolute disdain.
And Sganarelle, bloated with pride over his virtuous, obedient ward, marches the letter right over to his rival's house.
He hands Valère the very instrument of his own defeat.
He is literally running a postal service for the man trying to steal his future wife.
Yeah.
It's the arrogance of the engineer, assuming the machine is functioning perfectly, while the gears are quietly spinning in reverse.
It's amazing.
And the climax of this entire sequence is just devastating for Sganarelle.
Right, because Isabelle orchestrates a daring escape. She sneaks out of the house, using the darkness and a bit of disguise to pretend she is her sister, Leonore.
Right, she goes directly to Valère's house.
And Sganarelle, ever watchful, catches wind that a woman is sneaking into Valère's home. Because his ego will not allow him to believe it could be Isabelle, he immediately assumes it is Leonore.
And what does he do? He decides this is the perfect moment to utterly humiliate his older brother Ariste.
Of course he does.
He wants to prove, publicly and legally, that Ariste's permissive educational style was a catastrophic failure.
Sganarelle doesn't just knock on the door, he goes and fetches a magistrate and a notary.
He brings the full weight of the French legal system down upon his own head.
Yes.
He intends to legally bind the couple inside the house, thinking he is forcing Ariste's ruined ward into a scandalous marriage to save face.
But when the doors are finally opened, the woman inside isn't Leonore, it's Isabel.
Surprise.
Sganarelle has unwittingly, enthusiastically, brought the magistrate to legally marry his own captive to her lover.
It is the ultimate theatrical checkmate, and it forces the 17th century audience to confront the first core question of Moliere's developing argument. Can virtue actually be manufactured by eliminating freedom? And the play clearly argues that it is impossible. Sganarelle's physical restrictions did not create a virtuous woman.
No, they just bred a brilliant deceiver. Molière is demonstrating that a locked door creates a prisoner, not a partner.
Sganarelle's obsession with total control just blinded him to the reality that Isabel possessed an independent intellect.
Right. He thought he was suppressing her mind by locking up her body, but the physical restriction actually forced her to sharpen her intellect in secret.
She had to become a brilliant, ruthless strategist simply to survive the cage he built.
Exactly.
So that was 1661. Molière proved that physical bars are utterly useless against human ingenuity. But the sources suggest he wasn't satisfied.
No, the argument wasn't finished.
Perhaps Sganarelle failed because his methods were too crude. I mean, he only locked up her body, leaving her mind free to plot against him.
So Molière transitions to a year later, 1662, and unleashes the School for Wives.
And he pushes his thesis into far more dangerous territory.
He really does. The new protagonist, Arnolphe, is a mature man of 42. Like Sganarelle, he is driven by an absolute pathological fear of being a cuckold.
It's an obsession.
It is. He is so terrified of the mockery of society, so obsessed with the idea that women inevitably deceive men, that he decides a physical cage is insufficient. He decides to build a mental cage.
The psychology here is deeply unsettling.
Yeah.
Arnolphe is wealthy, he is arrogant, and he actually renames himself Monsieur de la Souche.
Right. Attempting to buy his way into the nobility with a title that literally translates to Mr. of the Stump or Mr. Blockhead.
Which tells you exactly what Molière thinks of him right off the bat.
Exactly.
And his master plan involves a staggering level of long-term manipulation. He adopts a girl named Agnès when she's just 4 years old.
Which is a profound violation of natural development. He hides her away in a rural convent with strict, explicit orders to the nuns that she is to be raised in absolute, manufactured ignorance. He wants her to be a true tabula rasa, a blank slate upon which he alone will write. He views himself not merely as a guardian and not just as a future husband, but almost as a divine creator.
He literally tells his friend that he wants to render her as idiotic as possible. He is terrified of the precieuses, the educated women in the Paris salons.
He views female intelligence as a weapon aimed directly at his pride. He boasts to his friend Chrysalde that a clever woman is a bad omen.
Right.
He says he wants a wife so profoundly stupid that if you ask her a riddle or invite her to play a parlor game, her only intellectual capacity will be to answer a cream tart.
A cream tart. It's so demeaning. And this brings up a massive philosophical flaw in Arnolphe's entire worldview, one that goes beyond just 17th century gender politics.
What's that?
Is Arnolphe actually trying to marry a human being?
Yeah.
It seems like he's attempting to build a perpetual motion machine of fidelity, something that violates the basic laws of human nature.
Yeah.
He wants an automaton that dispenses affection, mends his shirts, and reflects his own glory back to him, but has no internal processing unit of its own.
That is precisely what he is trying to build. He is trying to engineer a soul out of existence.
But the flaw is in his conflation of two completely different concepts, ignorance and innocence.
Yes.
Arnolphe treats them as exact synonyms, but they are fundamentally different states of being. Ignorance is just a blindfold you place over someone's eyes. It is the absence of data.
Right.
Innocence, however, is a state of the soul. It is a moral posture towards the world.
Yeah.
You can be fully aware of the darkness and complexity of the world and still choose to remain innocent.
But if you are merely ignorant the very second that blindfold slips, you have no moral framework to protect you. You have no defenses.
Exactly. And that is the exact psychological vulnerability Molière exposes to drive the plot.
Arnolphe has kept Agnès entirely ignorant of social conventions, of deceit, of courtly love, of the very concept of infidelity.
He has sterilized her environment.
He has, but he cannot erase her fundamental biological and spiritual human nature. That is the crack in the foundation of his mental cage.
And walking right through that crack is a young man named Horace.
Yes. Horace is a young gallant, and ironically, he's the son of Arnolphe's old friend Oronte.
Right.
However, Horace doesn't know that Arnolphe has arrogantly renamed himself Monsieur de la Souche. While Arnolphe is away on a trip, Horace happens to walk by the balcony where the teenage Agnès is kept.
And the interaction between them is incredibly simple, but it shatters Arnolphe's entire decade of careful planning. Horace sees her, and he bows.
It is the first intrusion of unscripted human connection into her sterile world. He bows to her. And Agnès, who has never been taught the complex rules of social engagement, relies on her natural instinct.
She just curtsies back.
He bows again, she curtsies again.
It is a moment of profound natural grace. Agnès, despite years of enforced state-sponsored ignorance, has this innate drive to connect, to learn, and to love.
The sources emphasize that this encounter with Horace doesn't just awaken her romantic desires either. It serves as the catalyst for her intellectual awakening. Love becomes the engine for her self-education.
She realizes, almost instantly, that there is a world outside of Arnolphe's control, and that the world is beautiful.
But then Arnolphe returns. He discovers that a young man has been visiting the house, and he descends into absolute panic. He realizes his blank slate has been written upon.
And his reaction to this panic reveals the supreme, hilarious irony of his character. I mean, this is a man who spent his life terrified of educated women. He wanted a wife who was completely unlettered, who feared books.
Yes.
But the moment he feels his control slipping, he decides the only way to reassert his dominance is to force Agnès to read a book.
It is a brilliant paradox. He realizes that mere physical isolation wasn't enough, so he attempts to codify his mental cage into scripture.
Right. He hands her a document called the Maximes du Mariage, the Maxims of Marriage.
He commands her to study it, to treat it as her sole moral compass. And if we analyze the text of these maxims, they reveal the terrifying depth of Arnolphe's insecurity.
They read like the manifesto of a tyrant, deeply afraid of his own shadow. Listen to this, Maxim 1. She who is honorably wed should remember that the man who marries does not take a wife for anyone but himself.
He is attempting to obliterate her existence as an independent social entity.
Right. And Maxim 2. She ought not to bedeck herself more than her husband likes. It goes on to strictly forbid makeup, attendance at social gatherings, gambling, and most crucially, any access to writing materials.
Maxim 7 is the most telling. It explicitly forbids ink, paper, and pens, stating that according to good customs, the husband should write everything that is written in his house.
He's trying to monopolize the very act of communication.
Arnolphe tells Agnès that omnipotence goes with the beard, explicitly linking his patriarchal authority to divine right. He threatens her with boiling cauldrons in hell if she violates these rules.
He is using the language of religious terror. He is essentially trying to deify himself in her eyes, replacing God with his own ego.
It's no wonder the real-world Catholic Church and the powerful religious factions in France fiercely attacked Molière after this play.
Really? I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. Arnolphe's blasphemous use of theology to enforce domestic tyranny was entirely too close to home for them.
Wow. But just like Sganarelle's physical cage, Arnolphe's educational experiment backfires completely and spectacularly.
Oh, completely. His attempt to weaponize literacy against her only gives her the tools she needs to defeat him. We see this play out in the most famous comic sequence in the play.
Yes, talk about the rock scene.
Okay, so Arnolphe, trying to sever the connection between Agnès and Horace, orders her to chase the young man away the next time he approaches the window.
Right, he commands her to throw a rock at him.
He expects absolute, unthinking obedience. And at first glance, the machine seems to be working. Horace approaches, and Agnès throws the rock. Arnolphe is ecstatic.
He thinks he won.
He genuinely believes his authority has been restored, and his teachings have saved her from perdition.
But she attached a letter to the rock.
She did. It is a missile carrying a missive.
Arnolphe handed her a book, inadvertently showing her the power of the written word, and she immediately uses it to bypass his physical blockade. And the text of her letter is incredible.
It is.
It doesn't have the refined, flowery vocabulary of the poisseuses in the Paris salons, but it possesses a raw, emotional truth that cuts right through Arnolphe's sophisticated artificial cage. She writes that she is beginning to understand that she has been kept in ignorance.
She uses the basic literacy she somehow acquired, likely self-taught during her long, lonely hours in the convent, to outwit her master. She takes his rigid, literal command, throw a stone at this man, and subverts it to establish a secret line of communication.
She is weaponizing literalism. You told me to throw a rock, I threw a rock. You didn't say I couldn't tie a note to it. This is where the true, dangerous intelligence of Agnès begins to shine. When Arnolphe later confronts her about Horace, demanding to know what happened, she is completely disarmingly honest. She admits that Horace kissed her hands and arms repeatedly.
And her honesty absolutely baffles Arnolphe. He expects deception, but he is met with transparency. He frantically tries to reestablish the mental cage, telling her that allowing a man to kiss her is a mortal sin, an offense against heaven.
And here is where she applies the critical thinking that Arnolphe spent 12 years trying to destroy. She asks, using flawless, basic logic, how something so pleasant, so gentle, and so sweet could possibly be a sin.
Arnolphe, trapped in his own theological distortion, tells her it is a sin unless you are married. The act of marriage magically removes the sin.
To which Agnès immediately concludes, "Excellent, then I want to marry Horace as soon as possible so it won't be a sin anymore."
It is a devastating philosophical counterpunch. She uses Arnolphe's own twisted, self-serving theological logic to justify her desire for the very man Arnolphe is trying to keep her from.
She takes the bars of his mental cage and bends them to form her own escape ladder.
It is brilliant, and we cannot discuss the comedy of this play without diving into the sheer, agonizing, dramatic irony of Horace's relationship with Arnolphe.
Because Horace still has no idea that the wealthy, aristocratic Monsieur de la Souche is actually Arnolphe.
Right, the tyrannical guardian of the girl he loves. Horace views Monsieur de la Souche as a sophisticated, older man of the world, a trusted friend he can confide in.
So he just tells him everything.
Horace literally narrates his entire plot to the very man he is plotting against.
The agony for Arnolphe is visceral. He has to stand there, maintaining his aristocratic composure, smiling and nodding, while Horace joyfully details every single failure of Arnolphe's master plan.
Yes.
Horace tells him how Agnès threw the rock with the letter. He tells him how she's beginning to see through her guardian's manipulation. He tells him exactly when and how they're planning a nighttime elopement.
Arnolphus is forced to become the unwitting archivist of his own defeat. He is constantly given the exact intelligence he needs to stop the young lovers. He constantly rushes ahead to set new traps based on Horace's information.
And yet fate, circumstance, and Agnes's newly awakened wit constantly outmaneuver him anyway.
What Molière is demonstrating here, with brutal comedic efficiency, is that absolute authority fundamentally blinds the authority figure.
Yes, Arnolphe is so utterly convinced of his own superiority, so certain that his blueprint for the human mind is infallible, that he literally cannot fathom that a teenage girl is capable of outsmarting him.
His need for total control makes him rigid. And because he is rigid, the moment he encounters a force that doesn't obey his laws of physics, he shatters.
So if we step back and synthesize the deep psychological and educational themes running through both of these plays, we arrive at a fascinating educational paradox.
Yes, let's look at the educational question here. Arnolphe's entire strategy was based on prevention. He tried to prevent Agnès from knowing enough about the world to make bad choices. But in doing so, by keeping her in that sterile, unlettered environment, he actively prevented her from developing the moral judgment necessary to make good choices.
He didn't protect her.
Yeah.
He intellectually crippled her. If you want a modern analogy for you listening, imagine a parent who refuses to let their child ever experience gravity because they are afraid the child might fall and scrape their knee.
Okay, sure.
They keep the child suspended in a harness for 18 years. When that child finally steps out of the harness, they don't know how to walk, let alone how to catch themselves when they stumble.
They have no balance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Arnolphe deprived Agnès of the intellectual gravity required to build moral muscle.
But the miracle of the play, the triumph of human nature, is that Agnès is resilient. She builds that moral muscle on the fly. And her journey highlights the sheer subversive power of irony.
Yeah, we discussed the historical reality earlier. Women in 17th century France were stripped of legal rights, barred from formal education, and subjected to the whims of the family-state compact. So what weapons did they have left?
They had language. They had wit.
Exactly. Molière shows women using the very structures designed to oppress them as the tools of their survival. Agnès' feigned naivety, her weaponization of literalism, her ability to turn Arnolphe's maxims against him, these are the tactics of the powerless outmaneuvering the powerful.
They fight not with broadswords, but with scalpels.
Which brings us to a deeply philosophical, specifically Chestertonian resonance that I want to inject into this analysis.
Okay, let's hear it.
Chesterton often wrote about the paradoxes of freedom and limitation. And the paradox Molière is circling here is profound. Perhaps freedom is not the enemy of fidelity. Perhaps freedom is the only thing that makes fidelity meaningful.
That is the intellectual core of both plays. It forces us to ask, can someone truly love if they are not genuinely free to reject that love.
Right. If I build a machine, program it to say I love you, and it says it every time I push a button, that statement has zero moral or emotional weight. It is just a sound wave.
It means nothing.
If I lock a prisoner in a reinforced cell and they say, I promise I will never leave you, it means nothing, because leaving is a physical impossibility.
Arnolph's demand for guaranteed, forced love is an absolute contradiction in terms. Love, by its very definition, requires the free will to choose otherwise.
Yes.
If Agnès has no concept of other men, no concept of the outside world, no concept of independence, her devotion to Arnolphe would not be love. It would be mere conditioning.
It would be the affection of a hostage.
Exactly. Ariste, in the first play, understood this when he gave Leonore her freedom. He knew that her choice to stay with him was only valuable because she possessed the option to walk away.
Arnolphe wants the comfort of certainty. He wants the blueprint to work every time. But love is inherently terrifyingly risky. You cannot have the profound reward of a chosen fidelity without accepting the terrifying risk of betrayal.
Now, in the end, the plot of The School for Wives is resolved by a classic theatrical deus ex machina.
All right, the fathers show up.
Yeah. Horace's father, Arnolphe, arrives in town with a wealthy friend named Enrique, who has just returned from 14 years in America.
Very convenient.
Right, and it is revealed, through a series of convenient coincidences, that Enrique is actually Agnes's true father, and that he had already arranged with Arnolphe for Agnès and Horace to marry years ago.
It is the ultimate 17th century comedy wrap-up. The powerful patriarchs swoop in at the last minute and officially arrange exactly what the young lovers were trying to achieve anyway. The status quo is technically preserved.
True, the external plot is resolved by patriarchal authority, but it is vital to note that the intellectual and moral victory belongs entirely to the newly awakened, self-educated Agnès.
Because long before the fathers arrive to fix the legal situation, Agnès has already intellectually dismantled Arnolphe.
She doesn't just escape him, she dissects him.
She confronts him directly. She tells him to his face that Horace is simply more lovable than he is. She tells him that if he wanted to be loved, he should have made himself more appealing, rather than trying to mandate affection through fear.
She diagnoses his failure with the utter clarity of someone who has just stepped out of a dark room into the sunlight. She has permanently shattered the mental cage.
She graduates from the School for Wives with honors, and Arnolphe is left completely destroyed. In the final scene, he is so humiliated, so fundamentally broken by the realization that his grand engineering project was a delusion, that he cannot even form words.
He simply sputters in rage and runs off the stage.
Which leaves us with the grand paradox at the heart of Moliere's two-part argument. The men who try the hardest to guarantee love, the men who rely on bolts, bars, and enforce ignorance, are the ones who inevitably lose it.
The man who is willing to accept the risk of freedom is the only one who receives love freely.
Sganarelle and Arnolphe built massive, intricate fortresses to keep love locked inside, and they only succeeded in locking themselves out. Ariste left the door wide open, and love walked right in and sat by the fire.
It is a timeless, beautiful psychological truth, articulated through the messy, hilarious lens of 17th century comedy.
But as we wrap up our time together in the common room today, I want to pull this away from the marital politics of Moliere's day and apply it to our own lives. Because the underlying question of how we handle fear and freedom remains.
It absolutely does.
If true fidelity, true love, and true virtue require the risk of freedom, how does this apply to how we educate our own minds today? In our modern information-saturated era, do we act like Arnolphe?
Are we terrified of intellectual infidelity?
Exactly. Do we lock ourselves in intellectual echo chambers, consuming only media that agrees with our preconceived notions to stay safe from bad or dangerous ideas? Or do we allow ourselves the freedom to explore the vast, messy, contradictory world of conflicting viewpoints, trusting our own moral judgment to test the waters, pick the locks, and find what is actually true?
It's the choice between the safety of the cage and the risk of the open door.
Are we building our own mental cages? It's something to chew on while the fire dies down. Thank you so much for joining us for this session. It has been an absolute pleasure unpacking the intricate clockwork of human nature with you today. Broadcasting from the Common Room on the little station on Commercial Street in Atchison, Kansas, this is Chesterton Radio. Good night.